You're listening to the Nerd to Know Media Network.
And hello, everybody. We are live here on Nerd to Know Media, the Wrestling Rewind, and all that other good stuff, because it is time for From the Dark. Dave, how are you, sir?
Oh, I'm doing excellent. And it's a great day. Oh my gosh, it's a great month. It's a great half year to be back from the dark.
Yeah,
Our farewell was much to do, and we are back.
yeah. It's been a while. It has been a minute, anyway. I'll tell you that much. A lot of tech issues. I think if anyone is watching on the Rewind channel, they've seen a bunch of new content going up. So yeah, keep an eye there of what's going on. But tonight we have a very interesting show lined up. It's all got to do with lost histories, the Vatican archives, and ancient museums and the whole idea of museums. So we have a lot to actually kind of look at, and it's a pretty interesting topic, Dave. I don't know how much you know about it, but
Dara, let's make something clear here. Why are you and I in any way, shape, or form qualified to talk about anything involving history? I mean, we're just two random people on the internet who likes to talk about random conspiracies, aren't we? We don't have anything in our bag of tricks that gives us some knowledge, would be by chance?
yeah. Well, in a past life,
In a past life.
you and I both are both fellows of history as such. We both have degrees in history, um, and I myself got a good bit through a postmasters graduate in classics. So yeah, I think we're quite qualified to talk about it. But in the time doing the masters, and then a little bit beyond that, thanks Irish government for pulling funding from beyond that. But hey, I'm not bitter, right? Hashtag not bitter.
Hashtag
Uh,
not bitter. Hashtag save Dave. I got 2 new followers this week. Follow me on Twitter at the Dave Stevens. I'm throwing that at the front of the show for those of you that don't make it to the end.
well, this doesn't go on Phoenix FM, so it doesn't get the axe of time, which sadly the rewind very often does.
Well, it also
But
doesn't get the axe of time of people turning the feed off after an hour, and I say it in the last second.
that's
I'm
fair.
putting it up front right now. Follow me on Twitter at the Dave Stevens.
That's
Do it.
fair. That's fair. But what actually kind of got me interested in this was there was a few things actually. Like I've always been kind of interested in Roman culture as a culture and how similar it is to us. And people just kind of forget that because they think that they were like more high class or whatever. And when the truth is, they really weren't. They just didn't have iPhones. But one of the cool things that they did have is museums, right?
Hmm.
And the whole concept of looking back at the history. And you go to Rome now, and obviously I lived there, and it was amazing. I was working as a tour guide, so I'm very familiar with all the museums that are in Rome.
People don't think about that though. People think, oh, we have museums now because we're the modern culture, and so we're looking back. People don't realize that museums also existed in those cultures as well as they looked back to their before times.
Yeah, I think that's what's really interesting about it. Like, there's very few evidence of what was in them and how they worked. Now, there's a bit, but it was kind of a different kind of thing where like public spaces acted as like a museum as such, where art was kind of displayed and it was a lot more kind of public. But there were some interesting kind of like the museums that kind of worked, and it's on the screen now. This is a great book by T.P. Wiseman. It's called The Myths of Rome. It's kind of expensive, and I love it. So I actually got it a couple of years ago. Um, and this kind of goes into some of the weirder elements of Roman society. And basically, like instead of looking back to their history, they would look at things as fact. So myths were fact for them in the way like Trojan War was a thing and all these other kind of things. So anything that would attach to a great myth would be considered history. And you kind of see some of that today with the Greek history archaeological museum, where you can see stuff from Mycenae or like that, where it's all the things from Troy, and even how museums kind of came into vogue as such, with Schliemann and stuff like that, where they initially said, "Hey, we want to find Troy," and we
Yes.
thought for years that Troy was fake, that was a myth, and then they found it, and then they found Mycenae, and then they found everything else that
Same
would.
way with Jericho.
Absolutely. You can actually see, I've actually seen a bit of the walls of Jericho in the British Museum. It's now, here's the thing. When you see it, it's like it's off to the side, and unless you know what you're looking for, you're gonna miss it, but it exists, you know. And what's interesting about it is, like, you know, we have this kind of perception that, as you said, you know, we're the dominant culture, we're the best culture, that we think that everything that happened before is just lies, and it's not. You know, so this is what kind of pulls me to this level, and we will talk about the Vatican secret archives. That's coming up. That this is kind of like a split conversation, because what's interesting about it is it's like, well, why did you keep stuff? Why do you archive things? This goes all the way back. This is something that we can see from the Roman period, and what's cool about it is, as I said, you know, looking back to this, there's not loads of references to it because it is kind of hard to find. And remember, a lot of stuff from Rome was kept by elites and stuff like that, so you wouldn't really have the time to figure this out. And you know what we do have was burned mainly, but
Well, it was burned. It was moved to Turkey. Also, the vast majority of the planet was not literate. So they wouldn't have had access to this information, even if it was sitting in front of them. And for me, one of the things that always comes to mind is when I go back and I look at the writings of Josephus. And he talks about how there were giant bones just displayed out in the museums and things along those lines. And that for him is, you know, he's talking about contemporary things. And we think of it as, well, that's so many thousands of years in the past that he must be, it must just be myths and legends.
mistaken.
And yet they actually exist.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it incredible, is
And
they
that's it. And
provide a framework for what we consider to be myths.
but that's the thing. That's a very good comparison, because Josephus obviously is a Jewish historian, and he is often overlooked the discussion of Jesus and around that time period. So he's quite a valuable source in that sense. You touch on something that is very interesting there, because there is a piece of work called the Servus Octus, right, which lists these talismans of empire, were great symbols of the Roman Empire from the Roman period, right, from the Imperial Rome period or a little bit before. And these were public displays of things that they had, not giants, because giants aren't really that important to the Romans as such. But there's the ages of the Great Mother. So this is probably a phrase. The Mother cult from Asia Minor in 2004, 204 BC, and this was kept on the Palatine. So if anyone doesn't know, there's 7 hills in Rome. There's the two main ones were the Palatine Hill, the Capitol Hill, right, which is where Americans get the right. Palatine
It's
Hill,
almost
palatial.
like it all ties in together. It's almost like there's some weird
It does.
shared history that certain groups keep keep going into modern times. Almost.
Absolutely. So the Palatine Hill is obviously where the Roman emperors lived. So this would have been
Is that where Emperor
displayed.
Palpatine is from?
No, but that's where his name comes from. So the next one was the scepter of Priam, and Priam was the king of Troy. All right, his scepter was kept, and then it was displayed. And what's interesting about it, the Romans actually believed themselves to be the progenitors of, right? They were literally descendants of Troy. Literally, that's where they saw themselves. And Augustus was really into that. That's what he kind of did as well. Really important to them. The next one is the Veil of Ilona, And for anyone who doesn't know, Troy was also known as Ilium, so that's kind of a play on her. And this also ties into the Troy story. The next one is also the Palladian. The Palladian was this little small statue of Athena, and it was held in the Holy of Holies in Troy. So you can see the three of them were already from Troy, and this is a myth, but it wasn't, and we
But it
know it
wasn't.
wasn't.
And in fact, we know now that
Exactly.
our descendants, in fact, came from the Palladian galaxy. So it makes no. I'm just trying to throw Dara off with his super serious historical take, but it does make you it it does make you wonder when you look back on things and we say, okay, well, all these crazy things the Romans believed in, they were myths, and then over time through science and through archaeology, we're actually able to not just prove these things but really explore these things in depth. And then the question that brings to me as the forefront is, well, what about the things that the Babylonians believed? What about their mystery religions? Could those have been truths that we
Well, that
thousands of years later treat as myths, and then thousands of
well,
years
see,
past that we say, oh, well, they thought it was myths, so they must have been.
what's interesting about this is, and what's important is, all these talismans were important to the specific narrative that they were trying to put out at the time.
Mhm.
And while they show, hey, look, this stuff existed, right? It also shows, well, where were they shown? The Capitol Hill isn't far from the Palatine Hill, which isn't far the Roman Forum, and these were all shown around the same time. So where these were housed, in the Capitol Hill, in the Temple of Vesta, on the Palatine Hill. Why? Well, because they were trying to associate power with each other. And it's, if you look at it through that lens, it makes a heck of a lot more sense than, well, this stuff didn't happen. It's like, it happened, but power is still controlling. Knowledge is still gifting people what they want to see. And this is something that we can see in on that's really going to be put into stark contrast. But to finish this
You
off,
think? Oh, sorry. I'll let you
um,
finish. I have a point after, but I want to hear your final point
sure.
first.
To finish this off, the other ones were the Ashes Oros Testes, and that's from, obviously, if you've read Euripides, you know who Orestes is. And then there's a big Venetian terracotta chariot of Jupiter. Sorry, in Jupiter's temple of King Tarquin, who was one of uh, the last kings of Rome, because Romans didn't really like kings, and this was obviously for him. But yeah, they're like big ones, and none of this stuff exists. Um, None of this stuff might have ever existed, but if it wasn't for that small little bit of, textual evidence that we have from that book, that was there. But it's interesting that looking at history, it's very often overlooked, and it's very important to kind of just look at the minutia, because that's actually that's where the truth for all this stuff in small books in obscure languages, and often hidden away. As I said, who studied classics for years
Yeah.
wouldn't have looked into that, only for the fact that that's what I like, and that's always kind of stuck with me. I looked into this, but I think it does draw a great comparison to how this stuff was used in the past, and maybe when we talk about something that might not exist, or you might dismiss, well, it's worth looking into it in a bit more detail. But it's very interesting to note that the Romans had their own museums. The Etruscans probably had their own museums. The Greeks definitely had their own museums. And we don't know, but who doesn't say that the Sumerians didn't? Who's to say that the Egyptians didn't? And what did they show? Well, history to them was a lot closer than it is now. So their myths were probably shown as history.
Well, Egyptians certainly had their museums. They just
Mm,
sort of had
absolutely.
living museums, if you will. I
Mm,
mean, you look at the Great Pyramid, and we know that they were nothing more than initiation temples, but we're taught in modern day that, oh no, this would have been a burial site, when more it had to do with the Osirian myth tail. Not 100% sure. We haven't dug far enough down, but you said something, so that I don't go off on a tangent there. You said something that made me pop in my head and wonder. You said they were displayed for power. And one of the
Yeah.
things that made me think about is the way that Germany during the 1900s would specifically seek out ancient artifacts in order to use them in ceremonial displays because they believed that they would imbue with them a sense of power and a sense of mystique over the population that would almost bespell their populace. And it makes me wonder, something that I always come back to the more we dig into any sort of ancient history or hidden or forbidden knowledge, I just keep coming to this point where I go, but maybe there's a reason that you have to keep certain things hidden away. As much as I love history and I want to know everything that's out there, I always keep coming back to this place of, well, maybe it's not such a bad thing if there really is a chamber under the pall of the Sphinx that we haven't gotten down to. Maybe we're not ready as humanity to quite yet fully understand what those objects are for. Maybe we have to reach and I'm not going like hippie woo woo on you guys here this early in the show, I promise, but maybe there is a certain level of consciousness that we need to achieve as a human race before we're ready for this sacred knowledge of the ancients. So as we go back and we see that things are hidden away in archives, it always makes me wonder if maybe it's okay for stuff to be hidden away until we're really ready as a global civilization to accept the knowledge, because it's only given to the elites essentially, right? And at a certain point, as long as it's not being used to corrupt, is that bad?
In a sense, I think it's more a case of, well, where does it come from and what is it, and if it's legitimate or not, and that's where I'd kind of draw the line. But
well, that's where we see all the problems
with
with Jesus artifacts, pieces of the cross that are sent out to all of these churches 300 years after the crucifixion. I mean, how do you validate any of these pieces? And so that's kind of the juxtaposition to the actual artifacts that you're speaking of, wouldn't you say?
There is a joke that if every piece of the cross reassembled, you have a forest. And that's but what I will say is, on that point specifically, when you're in Rome, there are some amazing churches. The amazing ones is Santa Croce in Jerusalem. So, and they have their own basically full collection of crucifixion, so the whole thing is all in, and they also have a replica of the shredded Turin, right. And it is pretty powerful, right? So, but what's interesting about it is all that stuff comes from the first real venture by Saint Helen to the Holy Land to get these, and that was only after. So that, to me, I'm like, that's not really that long. That would be about the same length of time talking about
as me going and trying to find artifacts from the Revolutionary War in America.
Or
right,
bring it back to my original point.
You didn't answer mine.
No. You are right. You are right. Right. You're 100% right. But it's also to go back to what we said with this. The same thing. They were about 300 years out as well.
Right.
So it is in possibility. It just seems that we've lost this willingness to kind of go with, well, why not? Instead of just cutting it off at the bone and going, oh, hocus pocus, or it's like, well, it could be. Let's test it. Let's dismissing something straight off the bat. Well, that's been tried, and we found Troy. As a result of people not listening to that, and I think it's important to kind of, particularly when we're looking at this stuff and religion, all that kind of stuff, we've had these ifs and buts, and even some of the Romans. I can't remember his name. Is Lucretius? He's the history's first atheist. He wrote a whole thing called On the Nature of the Gods. So even going back to ancient Rome, people were saying the same thing. But cool, as you said, 300 years ago, war. 300 years from High Rome was the time of Troy, was the time of all this kind of stuff. It's important to kind of in some sort of mind, you know.
It's fascinating to think
so
about. Like, it's
sorry, yeah,
fascinating for me to. It's okay. It's fascinating for me to wrap my head around the fact that somebody would say, well, Washington never crossed the Delaware during the Revolutionary War. That's all just made up because it's 300 years in the past. And then you look into it and it's like, yes, actually, there has been things that have been done ornamentally to enhance the story, but the story itself is true. So it's kind of separating that fact from fiction and getting down to, okay, what can we prove architecturally and through contemporaneous writings, and not through the ballads that would have been written to, grandize things.
I always found it interesting, like when you visit these sites specifically, particularly in Greece, because Greece is to this stuff than Rome. You go to Delphi, for example, and the people there are like, "This is where Apollo stood." And you're like, "What a god?" They're like, "Yeah," and you're like, "Right." Reactions to that, you're like, "Okay, well, that's obviously, you know," or, "Well, where did that come from? Why does that? Why does that exist?" And it's like, okay, well, who's to say he wasn't there? Could man could have been, one of these great heroes, and then obviously legend becomes myth and all that kind of stuff. But it's interesting that,
like Gilgamesh,
exactly, so it's like Gilgamesh, like Hercules, like Cuchulainn, like, all around the world there's these figures that appear and do things, and obviously they're the men of renown. We talked about this on our Anunnaki series, which we will get back to, obviously, because that's an ongoing. But it's funny that these things exist and these stories exist, and digging down is kind of cool. So I know listeners of this show are great, but keep an open mind when it comes to this stuff as well, because just because we don't know it now doesn't mean that it's not true. So moving on to stuff that we can actually verify, but also
all right,
stuff
we're
that's kind
hitting
of fun also.
Atlantis.
Well, Atlantis, we've moved Atlantis. We're going to do Atlantis next time around, because Atlantis is fun.
No, we're just talking about things
and
we can
also, I
actually
think,
verify.
well, the thing. So we're going to talk about the Vatican secret archives now, right?
Yes.
So
Excited.
I have seen,
Scared.
I
Kind of
have
scared
seen,
though.
I have seen some of the Vatican secret archives. I kid you not. This is not a joke. This is actually true.
Well,
So
I've got my
in
popcorn ready.
So in 2012, there was an exhibition of certain pieces from the Vatican archive. It was housed. I'll be very impressed. I have mentioned it. I'll give you a hint. It's pretty much exactly where the talismans of empire were housed.
Would this have been where the scepter of Troy was?
Close. It's the Capitoline Hill. So the
I was
Capitol.
gonna go. That seemed too obvious.
I know, but I
All
thought that was quite. I thought that was quite fitting. Where I'm like, wow, 2,000 years later, used, and it's still a museum now to this day. Like, you can go to it and it's a museum. See, this special event was only for a limited time, and I just happened to be living there, and I went in and it was incredible. So I have actually seen and can verify some of these things. The exhibition was called Lux and Arcania, so I have the book over there, and Google that, you'll see it. Some of the stuff that they've actually like talked about, yeah, here it is here. Lux and
I
Arcania,
see
the
it up
Vatican
there. The
Secret
Pines
Archives,
of
yeah.
Rome, right?
Yeah, so there's a few things, and what was in it was pretty interesting, because yeah, this is real, right? This is real. I've seen some before we get into what it is and what's inside it, let's just kind of go to old Wikipedia, which you guys should always use with a grain of salt, but it's a good jumping off point. Is a Vatican archives. It's called the Vatican Apostolic Archive, right? And known until 2019 as the Vatican Secret. So it's a mistranslation of the word secret. It doesn't really mean secret. It means kind of like for the Pope's eyes only.
I was going to say, for if you saw it, it can't be that much of a secret if we're doing a show on it.
Yeah, exactly. But it is quite difficult to actually like get into, and I will talk about it. It was founded in 1612, and it is like just reams upon reams upon reams of documents, account books, all that kind of stuff.
Can I ask you a question,
does,
like an honest question off the bat here?
Absolutely.
Why? I mean, I think I have my own answer for this question, but why do you think they make it such a secret? Why not just digitize these documents and make it accessible to researchers all over the planet? Why only let a select number of people in?
Well, it's you can actually go in. That's the thing.
Well, you can, but it does take a lot of permission. Do you think it's because, hey, there's some things in here that we kind of really don't want to get out? If we open up all the books, this isn't going to look good. And are we, as a modern day civilization, suffering and maybe going through some of the very same things that they went through that we could avoid if we could have access to the source material?
Potentially, but if it was just not coming in here under any circumstances, then I would agree with you. But because there is the opportunity to open up, and because they did stuff like that, it's like, look, we have this cool stuff. I'm not so much. I think it's more just the logistics of it. Like,
because most people, when they think of the Vatican archives, their mind goes to the Da Vinci Code, and they think of Tom Hanks walking through the the humidors and all of that. That's where people's mind go when they think. But I would imagine it's probably a lot more just scrolls stacked on top of each other, maybe not even completely sorted.
That's it. It's not even scrolls. It's more kind of just books, just loads of books. The Da Vinci Code more kind of shows what Google is like, the inside of a Google server farm, more than which, to be fair, there's more details to be found there, I think, which we also don't have access to. But I think I'm being honest, I think it's more just the logistics of digitizing that is unbelievable. The manpower needed for that is unbelievable. The internet isn't great in the Vatican, so I don't think that's going to happen. And also, where do you store the data? How do you data?
Well, don't you just mysteriously store it in God's cloud? He can do wondrous things there.
Absolutely, but see, here's the thing: the Vatican is quite small, so and they're not going to dig up all the stuff that's there to put the server farm in, so they can't hold the data on.
What's wrong with Pine Gap
with
over in Australia
and all that stuff? So, all I'm saying to you, that's probably why.
That actually is probably the best answer I've ever had. Something that worries.
But
no,
hold on, Dave, before you
jump
in, just 1 second. There has been a digitized process ongoing since 2018, right? So there's about 180 terabytes of and stuff like that. So they are getting there. But remember, dude, this stuff is like data is big, and it's very hard for data securely. So I don't know how Vatican's cybersecurity division is going. If they want me, hey, I will come up gladly.
Yeah, hey,
but other than that,
whichever one of you wants to hire me, I'm available. I prefer it's not the Jesuit one. I know you're in charge. We can get into that later, but I can work with you.
But to be honest with you, though, I think it's the same reason that, like, for example, Pompeii is still about 70% undiscovered.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And it's because there isn't the manpower and there isn't the desire and there isn't the funding to do it. You
Well,
know,
hey, I mean,
unless
if
there's a
we're
pope that's like, hey,
yeah,
sorry,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry, but I was just going to say, I mean, you want probably what to me is the biggest egregious example of that in right now happening is Göbekli Tepe, where we've uncovered about
Mm,
10% of it, they think, and the other 90% may never be uncovered because unfortunately Klaus Schmidt has passed. He's no longer alive. There's not, funding
mm,
for it, and Turkey's like, hey, we have farms there. That's how we make our livelihood. Like, we're not giving all this
yeah,
land over, but who knows what. So if we have the biggest find of literally human history buried under the ground because of manpower, then hey, is it really that shocking that text upon text, which, like you say, would make the NSA's building in Utah look silly by size comparison in terms of what it would need to store? I mean, it makes sense.
yeah,
I mean, we like St. Peter's
yeah.
Basilica. We don't really want St. Peter's server room.
And that's it. And I don't think, again, like for people, I'm sort of having this realization talk about computer stuff that like not everybody like gets what these things are, right? A server farm is huge.
If you had
It's
tried to have this
massive.
conversation with me a year ago, I would not have understood you.
And
Honestly.
that's fair. And look, that's a thing. But I think it's important that when people think of it's not just a data farm. It's not just one or two rooms. This thing is huge. It's massive, and just that's storing data. It's running machines, going, and it's also quite expensive. How do you think Bezos made all his money? It wasn't on Amazon. It was on the cloud services. That's where the money comes from, right?
Nah, man,
They own everything.
it was by selling college books online.
Oh, of course, of course. But this is it. Like Netflix runs on it. Pretty much any kind of service that you use running on an AWS web server. So, or Azure, but it's mainly AWS. But yeah, so that's to that, Dave. And I think that's probably the most realistic aspect of it. But that said, there are stuff that I can verify that's there because I've actually seen it. Right. So if you look on the screen, there's some cool stuff there. And the first one is the threat from Henry VIII. And what's cool about it is these things are massive. These are big, like old timey scrolls, right?
Yeah,
And
we're geeks about this kind of thing. Like, we really do enjoy wax seals. We really do get excited about cylinder seals when we look at Sumer. Like, there's something about this that
mm,
just, I don't know. It makes the history feel more real to know the craftsmanship that went into it. When I read an illuminated document, so to speak, and I actually see those
mm,
illustrations that the monks did and the way that they
mm,
did the calligraphy, it's not just
yeah,
writing, it's not just art, it's a spiritual experience unto itself, and that's what they were doing and creating, and that's why it's so
absolutely,
wondrous to behold.
absolutely, and that's the kind of thing. And also my question would be, how do you get that stuff across in digital format? You don't.
Right.
The actual letter itself
Mm.
is impressive
Mm.
because it's a work of art, but
It doesn't work
the
as a
actual
tweet.
no, it doesn't work as a text. It's a block of text. The
No.
next one kind of does though. The next one is the actual parch containing the testimonies of 200 and alleged testimonies of 231 knights from the trial of the Knights Templar by Philip the Fair. Right. This is obviously when the Knights Templars were uh, on trial for blasphemy and immorality. Right. This thing is huge. It is 60 meters long, and the way they had it set up, it was moving along. It's huge. It's unbelievable, and it's incredibly impressive. Digitized would be kind of interesting to go through, unless you read French or Latin, you're going to have a bad time because it's not in English. But quite good. It's very, very chilling to see in person. It has a lot of power from it. But that thing is real. Those first two are 100% real.
And something that needs to be said, if we're going to bring that topic up, since you said the word power, it's even more important to be brought up. When we talk about the secrecy, maybe something like that you keep secret to a certain extent because it was just a power move.
Mm.
You know, one of the biggest
Yeah.
misconceptions that people have about the Roman Empire is this concept that Rome fell. Well, the truth is, Rome never fell. The Caesar became the Pope,
No. Well,
and Rome became the Vatican.
yeah. Well, on that point, see, the Roman Empire split in the 15th century. Sorry, it split in the 4th century, and obviously the West and the East didn't, and became Byzantium, right? But the Roman, the Roman way of life, the Roman history, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, you're right. That it literally is the Vatican. That's what it became the Catholic Church. And after Constantine converted, that was kind of the push forward. The Pope is a king, the king and emperor of the Vatican, right? That's
For
what he
years
is.
and years and years, you could not be a king without the approval of the Pope. And that was long after the fall of Rome. And one of the most inspiring things I've come across is when you read the writings from the Templars who did not get caught up in this power grab and you see where they
Mm.
ended up and what they put forth.
What I
You
would,
kind of get a
but what
different
I will
sense
say
of
on
what
that,
happened.
what I will say on that, that time period is very interesting because that was when, oh, the papacy also wasn't in Italy always.
Very
You
true.
know, when the Roman Empire fell, it fell into the hands of barbarian tribes. Some were better than others. But the papacy actually had to leave and went to Avignon in France. And the
Yep.
Templars obviously were rooted in France. And then the king, Philip the Fair, was in a lot of debt to the Templars, who basically invented. And the Pope was pretty much in the king's pocket and pretty much held at ransom. So that history of it, that's what happened.
Yes.
These facts, right? So
And
this
that
is worth bearing in
actually,
mind. There's
yeah,
more to
it's
it.
worth bearing in mind because that actually explains for those of you who wonder, well, when we talk about World War II and we talk about Himmler's expeditions, why did so many of them happen in France? It's because so many Vatican
Mm.
treasures ended up in France because that's where the Templar Order was as well. So many of the so-called occult objects that would get brought into that part of Germany and used in those ceremonies literally came dug up from basements in France that had been hidden under churches. I mean, when you get this
Absolutely,
whole
and just and
concept of
just
history together, it really helps you get a sense of what makes things function. And this picture you're bringing up is breathtaking. Please tell me about this.
yeah. So there's two pictures there. One is the perception that people have of what's in it. Oh, um, from a wild conspiracy site. And the other is what Lux and Arcania look like. This is the expedition that I saw, and this is what I can verify. So this is the Capitoline Museum,
Hmm.
and if you can see my mouse there, so this is the Capitoline Museum here, and here is the how everything was left. So it is breathtaking, but I don't know. I think the fun in this conspiracy theory kind of it's also its weakness.
I
Where
know our
he
problem is
also
we finally come back to the conspiracy podcast, and we're presenting straight history. There's been very little conspiracy talk on this show.
well, as I said, the last image is just announces aliens and all this other stuff, and Dan Brown,
Right.
obviously is very much to blame for that with the whole Jesus Christ bloodline thing. Is what it is. But
Oh,
the other stuff on it, there's no. There are some bad stuff that
bad
we've seen
stuff.
and we can verify it. Yeah, we can verify. So one is from the communications with the Nazis in World War II,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and that kind of stuff is real. It's there's a thing known as the Hitler's Pope,
Well, the cover up is what's astounding.
Or-
The cover up
Absolutely.
that
So-
started in 2018 or so, when the Vatican started putting out documents pretending that they were helping to hide people that were being persecuted, and always
Mm.
had these secret plans against the Germans. It makes you wonder, even though we have modern day sensibilities, how much can you trust? Because we're only talking about 70 years into the past. So the
Absolutely.
secrecy
And
kind
that's
of does cloud judgment.
and that's it. And that's why I say, when it's more kind of scandalous and stuff like that, it doesn't need to be, because the real world is more crazy than that. It's, if a conspiracy theory needs to make sense, and sometimes it just doesn't. And I think the Vatican Secret Archives is one of them that is the spectacle and image of it just doesn't pan out in reality.
Right.
It's like, I just, from my perspective, I'm like, listen, bureaucracy, that's the problem, and logistics, that's also the problem. So
Well,
yeah, if they just
logistics,
manage to handle their data better, it will be fine.
we'd be fine with the data. Or you talk about, we've mentioned it a couple times now with the Da Vinci Code, and we talk about the bloodline thing, and the misconception there is that the meaning of the Holy Grail was supposed to represent Jesus's bloodline moving forward, versus
Yeah.
if you delve into it enough, you realize that no, the Holy Grail actually is talking about the bloodline moving backward. And the fact that here we go, I'm going to throw a conspiracy out there, people, just so we can have something sensational to lash your teeth in at the end here. In order for the New World Order to rise, we need to have somebody of a Luciferian belief who would claim to have heritage linking back to King David. And so for that to occur, that's where you then get this moving forward of the line of David post Jesus, which is, it's a fun thing to explore, but at the same time, Bill Cooper just could have paid his taxes.
Yeah, so there you go. To finish things off, I don't know, I would say there's some good books on the topic. If you guys want to check it out, I would say the is really fun, because it's a book that you'll probably never hear being brought up, just because it's so obscure. And if you want to look into more of the Vatican Secret Archives, check on Lux and Arcania. It's quite good. But Dave, we're going to reset here and talk about,
but can we name
guys
drop?
tend to
I
hate
know
each
we
other.
didn't do it because we didn't cover it that far, but can
Absolutely.
we actually name drop the book that led us to actually doing this show in the first place? I can't pronounce his last name, so I'll let you take that. But there's an amazing book called The Immortality Key. You've probably heard it on Coast to Coast or on Joe Rogan's podcast. And it's more focused on the mysteries, in terms of the mysteries of Eleusis, and also Soma that you have running rampant throughout the Hindu religion and what was in those tonics. But he does touch on so much, including the secrets of the Vatican archive. And it was actually listening to him that kind of sparked our idea of, well, he's covered the drug part. We'll let him handle the psychedelics. Let us delve into some of the history that he went into, which is fascinating.
We will get there. We will get there. Like, I think I want to touch on the mysteries. I've actually been to these places. I've been to Elysium. So I'm not. I've literally been to these places. So I do kind of want to talk about. Well, I haven't been to Elysium. The Elysium cults. So,
I've been there, just not physically.
But yeah, the book is called the Immortality Key: The Secret History of Religion with No Name. Brian C. Marerixu. And here's the thing: we might not be able to get him on the show because he is kind of all the hot at the moment. But we will definitely review his book. And here's the thing, guys: if you're new to the podcast, you never checked it out before, and you have some interest in the topics, leave your comments below. Let us know. If you have any guests that you on the show, let us know that too. That would be pretty cool. And yeah, we're going to try to do this more often, because we kind of fell out of habit there for a little while of doing the show. So we're going to try to do it more often. But definitely,
we'll be perfectly frank, this is what Dara and I do in our spare time anyway. So
Absolutely.
actually getting to talk about it every couple of weeks or so is something that I think will be good for both of us and the changes we have coming up in life soon. I think this will be a good way for us to have some fun and fancy aside from the world of men in tights rolling around and flipping.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, it's one of those shows that we're going to keep trying to do. And, topics, let us know under the comments. That's the best way to get in contact with us directly as well. So the next one coming up is this. So we're probably going to have a bit more fun with that one because that's wild. And so guys, we will see you next time here on From the Dark. Bye, guys.
Join us at nerdtoknowmedia.com.